Hi guys, welcome to the week one fundamentals of fat loss. So just a short workshop on around some of the science, evidence-based reasons how you're going to be losing some fat in these next couple of weeks if you're on the summer shred with me. So objectives are that we're going to look at some understanding the science of fat loss. So hopefully understand actually how we lose fat and why we lose fat. We're going to debunk some of the common myths around it. We're going to learn how to obviously track meaningful progress and obviously understand that. So first thing is, what is fat loss? So fat loss is basically our body using fat as a fuel source. So that is our body is utilizing basically lipids, which is fat, that's sort of stored around our body as the fuel source. So rather than food that we're consuming, so food that you eat through your dietary intake, it is actually just using fat as the fuel source. Some of the common myths that we hear all the time in the industry, I think is worth debunking, is that we have something called the starvation mode. You may have definitely heard this, quite popular amongst people that don't really know what they're talking about. But the reality is that it doesn't lead to us losing more weight, and there is no such thing as starvation mode. And actually, in fact, starving yourself in terms of not giving yourself enough calories does actually lead to an adaptation. So your body basically down-regulates. And we're going to touch on the basically thermogenic adaptation that happens during that. Meal timing. So again, meal timing doesn't particularly matter for fat loss. It is the overall calories that count. So you often probably heard breakfast being the most important meal of the day. That's not the case. Breakfast is a great way to start the day, but there is a lot of evidence surrounding fasting for fat loss. So having periods of non-fed time. So for example, having cut-offs of certain meals at a certain time, for example, such as 6, 7, 8 o'clock on an evening and not eating until the following sort of like lunchtime. Spot reduction is another myth. You cannot target specific areas of the body where somebody says, I want to just lose this particular piece of fat on this particular part of my body. Unfortunately, that is not the case. But there is some small evidence that's coming out recently that it does demonstrate a little bit of spot reduction. So, for example, there was a study that was done around a study where basically participants were given oblique, so abdominal exercises for a period of 6 to 8 weeks, I believe it was. And they did see slight adaptation, i.e. reduction in fat in them areas. But in terms of overall fat, we've got to think of overall fat as almost like a kitchen roll. And if you took a couple of sheets away of that kitchen roll and you looked at it in terms of down the barrel, you'd still see quite a lot of kitchen roll. But if you kept taking 2 or 3 sheets away, eventually we'd see the narrowing of the actual roll itself. So this brings me to the sort of science behind how and why we lose fat. So total daily energy expenditure. This is broken up into a couple of different areas. So that is basically your energy in versus your energy out. And basically, in order to lose fat, and we've heard this lots and lots, is that basically we've just got to be consuming less calories. Okay, so your total daily energy expenditure is made up of 2 parts, 2 broad parts. It is the resting energy expenditure, which is your basic metabolic rate. So that is your body laid down at rest, doing absolutely nothing. So around 70% of your daily energy is just spent doing that. So that is, for example, your cells repairing themselves, your body breathing, so respiration, for example. Then you've got your non-resting energy expenditure. So that is activity. Okay. So this is some of the stuff where we can basically start to pull the levers. Okay. So you have EAT, which is your exercise activity thermogenesis. You have thermic effective feeding, which we'll come on to in a second. And you have your non-exercise activity thermogenesis. Now, you can calculate your calories. There is a free calculator. If you want to stop and jump on that link, you can do that. But you should already be sticking to some calories that I've calculated for you. Going back to this, so EAT is, as you can see, around 5 to 7% of the overall energy that we burn in a day. So this is planned exercise. So this is that you're going to go to the gym 3 times a week and that you're going to go and do 10,000 steps every day. And that's planned, okay? Thermic effect of food is that every time you eat something, you can see that again accounts for about another 10%. Every time you eat something, your body uses a little bit of energy to digest that, okay? The reason that we promote and having high protein diet is that basically proteins take longer to digest. Okay, so basically they have a higher thermic effect of feeding. Carbohydrates have a lower thermic effect of feeding, so therefore our body can process them much more quickly and they get into our system a lot quicker. NEAT is your non-exercise activity thermogenesis. So that is non-planned exercise. So you would basically broadly describe this as fidgeting. Okay, so this is maybe doing a manual job, for example, laborious job, for example. It could be avoiding periods of, for example, prolonged seating, for example. So it may be that you're up and about, doing gardening, doing housework, doing whatever. That is just that you're moving. It's just that you're not sat down doing anything. Okay. So overall, that accounts for the whole total daily energy expenditure. When it comes to energy in versus energy out, you want to be looking at being in a caloric deficit. So this comes into your target. So you will be sticking to a target where it is between, let's say, 5 and 10% of your total maintenance calories. So if we wanted to stay the exact same weight, so this comes back to this energy balance. If we wanted to stay the same weight, we would eat our maintenance calories. So that energy in is equal to the energy out. If we want to lose weight, we basically have to tip the balance in the opposite favor. So we have to give our bodies less calories than we're actually burning. Okay. So that's that balance tipping in our favor. So that is, typically speaking, clients that I work with and you guys are probably on around 500 calories per day. And that is around 3,500 calories per week, which equates to the magic number of 1 pound of fat equating to around 3,500 calories. Okay, a little bit more science for you. So hopefully you're sticking with me. So how your body utilizes fat as a fuel source. So this is a little bit into the depths of lipolysis. So I'll try and keep this as simple as I possibly can do. But if you want to stop these slides and have a look later on, you can do. When we consume less calories, basically our body needs energy. Okay, so when we eat fewer calories, our body needs fuel. All right, so our body is scrounging around for energy. Okay, so energy is basically glycogen or glucose. That's typically what our body only knows the form of energy in. That stimulates the system to basically, or stimulates hormones to basically release fat to be converted back as a fuel source. So that is hormone sensitive lipase. So that starts the process. So when we don't have enough energy in our body or glucose in our body, the hormone sensitive lipase stimulates the lipolysis process. So it kicks off that process of saying we need more energy. Okay. Fat cells, so basically triglycerides, they release into basically the body. So they become fatty free acids. Okay. So that is the process of lipolysis. So these fatty acids enter the bloodstream and travel to basically organs, muscles that are needed. Okay. Sounds really simple, but our body cannot do that if we're still giving it too many calories. Okay. And we'll come into that in a second. So basically, our body then utilizes the glycogen that it's generated, gone through lipolysis and put into the bloodstream to use as energy. So it's basically, therefore, the fat is oxidized to basically use as a fuel source. Okay. So I'm going to come back to, in fact, let's go here. So we have something referred to as adaptive thermogenesis. So basically, when our body becomes good at utilizing fat as a fuel source, our body basically can downregulate. Okay, so basically, it can downregulate the amount of energy that we need. Okay, so basically, the lighter that you are, or the more fat that you lose, basically, it makes diet. It slows down that weight loss process essentially. So we have three things. So the mechanical model. So basically, the mechanical model is the reduction of energy expenditure directly responding to having basically a smaller body to move. So as you weigh less, your body's burning less calories. Okay. There is a threshold model. So in this particular model, so the second one along, this one is that energy expenditure will decrease beyond what can be accounted for by the weight loss until a certain limit is met. So the limit is thought to be lowest at the end of the individual's body fat set point. So once a set point is reached, Only further loss of energy expenditure will be due to having a smaller body, if that makes sense. And then there's the spring model. So in the spring model, energy expenditure continually decreases in the proportion to the amount of weight that is lost. So thus, the more weight that you lose, the greater drop in adaptive thermogenesis occurs. So basically, what these three models tell us is that it basically, as our body gets better at using fat as a fuel source, his body adapts to that, okay? And we've got to recognize that if we want to continually make ourselves lean and obviously be lean for summer, for example. So the implications of adaptations for you, kind of what matters is that it can make long-term dieting harder. So when we stay in a prolonged caloric deficit, that can make dieting harder. So what we need to do is implement things such as diet breaks through reverse dieting, but we also need to give recognition to what the G flux or the energy flux is. So the energy flux is that sometimes we need to actually consume a little bit more calories and also burn more calories in order to upregulate our body's ability to process, okay? So I'm going to move on to some pyramids of priorities. So fundamental, at the very, very bottom of the pyramid is that we have to be sticking to our lifestyle and sticking to the training plan, sticking to the caloric deficit at the very bottom base layer of the pyramid. As we work up the pyramid, basically caloric intake and energy balance becomes the second most important. So regularly hitting your daily intake or your caloric deficit. Macronutrients then come next. So that is looking at protein intake and protein types, for example. Then the micronutrients, so things such as, are you getting enough magnesium? So, or are you getting enough vitamin D3 or vitamin C? Other things that can help supplement, or other things that can help supplement your sort of diet, if that makes sense, in terms of those food intake. Then we look at timing and frequency again, and then only then do we look at supplementation. So right at the very bottom, we've got to be sticking to the plan, sticking to the calories and keeping that energy balance, okay? Protein prioritization is also key. So we should be aiming for between 1.6 and 2.2 grams per kilogram of body weight to be hitting somewhere around our protein target. And we should be looking at that total overall amount first and foremost. As we get more consistent with that, we then can start looking at the distribution across the day. So are we intaking 30 to 40 grams in breakfast time? Are we intaking another 30 to 40 grams at lunch? And then are we intaking another 30 to 40 grams on an evening meal, as well as then high protein snacks throughout the day where needed? The next then important thing is looking at the quality of the protein. So are we picking quality lean meats, for example? Are we picking proteins that actually, are total, what we would describe as like total proteins, for example? And then obviously things like timing comes at the very, very top of that pyramid. The blueprint, which a lot of us and you guys should be familiar with, this is something I talk about in terms of non-negotiables, is sticking to your caloric deficit, eating whole foods, so single ingredient whole foods where possible. So trying not to overcomplicate your diet. Don't eliminate foods that you love, because like that is adherence is how we stick to it. So if it's foods that you enjoy eating, continue to eat them. Train 2 to 5 times per week, which most of you guys are. I'm sure you are. Stay active every day. So that is that fidgeting, that's hitting your 10,000 steps, and then applying that 80-20 rule. So 80% of the time we sticking to the plan, 20% of the time we're giving ourselves that freedom to do what we want. Be patient and don't quit is obviously the bottom one. So tracking, a lot of you guys are tracking now, and it is tracking everything. So what gets measured gets managed, and what gets managed gets improved. Okay, so basically a lot of people think success is linear. So we think that success is just going to go straight up, but what it actually looks like, it's a bit of a messy middle, if you like. So that up, down, sideways, weeks of maybe not making much progress, and then weeks of actually making lots and lots of progress. So, but if we don't know what works, i.e. we don't manage it and we're not measuring it, it's difficult to rinse and repeat what does. So when we're thinking about things that do work for us, we should be able to go back and go, that's what worked for me. So it was when I was doing this. It was when I was eating this. It was when I hit 10,000 steps daily, for example. Things such as journaling. So you guys may be journaling on an evening. It is a great way to keep yourself accountable. So thinking about questions such as, when was your last meal on an evening? Reviewing your sleep pattern. So waking up in the morning, actually, how did you sleep last night? MyFitnessPal, most of you guys should be familiar with that. So tracking, but not using it as a tracker, but using it as a planner. So plan your meals in advance. And it isn't about planning the full week. It might just be about planning, let's say, 3 or 4 meals. So again, talking about those 3 key breakfast meals that you might have, those 3 go-to lunches that you might have, or those 3 go-to evening meals that you can have. And if you're ever stuck, always think about those helping hands. So you've got helping hands in terms of portion sizes. So a clenched fist is 1 portion of protein. So if you're trying to hit twice your body weight in protein, maybe you need to be going with 2 fists worth of food, okay? Particularly on your protein. Carbohydrates, usually the smaller part of your palm. And then fats and oils and spreads are usually the length of your thumb. So trying not to overdo it on the fats, oils, and spreads, and particularly avoiding high calorie sources, for example. So track everything, get a good handle on measuring when you know when you're at. Okay. Carol Dweck famously said, becoming is better than being. And I think this is really relevant for fat loss in terms of when you're getting new to tracking calories, is that it's not about being perfect, and you're on that journey of becoming a better version of yourself. So you're on that journey of becoming the leanest version of yourself, the healthiest version of yourself, the fittest version of yourself. So I think when it comes down to tracking, it isn't about being perfect. It's about having a close enough attitude towards, this is what I've eaten. It's close enough. And I've got a rough idea of what I've eaten and what my training session looked like as well. Okay. Thank you very much. That brings me to the end of the presentation. So if there are any questions, I feel like I've gone through that relatively quickly, but I wanted to do it as a recording rather than a live chat or presentation, so that you guys can drop me some messages at the end, or drop in the comment section. There's my references. Preview for next week, we're going to be talking about sort of hunger hormones. So we're going to be looking at ghrelin, leptin, and cravings, and how we overcome some of those cravings when we're getting hungry, and sort of some top tips around sort of sorting around your evening routine. So hope to see you next week. Thanks very much. Bye.